That title looks very clickbaity, but it isn't. Down in the description is a link to the forum post in which, quote, the IS-7 as a linear or premium tank is planned, perhaps as a promo. But what exactly is the IS-7? Now, keep in mind, a lot of the information and assets I'm about to show come from the World of Tanks related sites, but nonetheless should give a good idea of what this tank is capable of in War Thunder. At the end, I'll even throw in my own opinions and start a discussion on this news. In the description you'll find a link to Silent Stalker's For the Record blog post on the IS-7. I'm going to directly quote some of the most important aspects. The high level of protection of IS-7 was provided not only by an increase in the thickness of armor plates, but also due to the significant slope. The form of the front was similar to the IS-3, pike nose, with somewhat smoothed counters. The mass of the IS-7 reached 68 tons. A serial V12 cylinder diesel engine M50, 1050 horsepower at 1850 RPM was installed, used on fast offshore boats. The fuel type is diesel. It is a 62.4 liter engine with a maximum power of 772 kilowatts or 1050 horsepower and maximum torque of 4606 newton meters. The top speed this tank could reach is 60 km per hour on flat terrain with a cross-country speed of 32 km per hour average. The range is 300 kilometers and the horsepower per ton power to weight ratio is 15.4. It has an individual torsion bar suspension and a ground pressure of 0.97 kilogram per square centimeter. The first copy of the prototype was ready on September 8th, the second December 25, 1946. On field tests, they showed the remarkable speeds for such machines. 60 km per hour maximum speed and an average speed on rough road was 32 km per hour. None of the heavy tanks of that time could boast with such high speed characteristics. Increased armor and slope for the hull and turret after firing 88mm, 122mm and 128mm shells at the prototypes on the NIIBT site at the Izora factory. The thickness of the frontal plate was increased to 150mm, placing them under vertical angles of 50 to 52 degrees. The turret was given a less vulnerable form, it became more rounded, and the thickness of the front was adjusted to 240 to 350mm at an angle of 45 to 0 degrees. The side plates to 185 and 240mm at angles of 30 to 45 degrees. Even the most powerful guns existing at that time, 128 and 130mm armor-piercing projectiles, failed to penetrate the armor. The crew of the IS-7 consisted of 5 men and 4 of them were placed in the turret. The first prototype was armed with a 130mm S-26 gun. It used separate case ammunition and the mass of the projectile was 33 kilograms. To increase the rate of fire and ease the work of the crew, a pneumatic loading mechanism was installed, developed in conjunction with the Institute of Artillery. The next version of the IS-7 was armed with a new 130mm naval gun S-70, almost 7 meters long, over 7 meters long, a 54 caliber barrel, and its weight was 4,225 kilograms. The shell had a mass of 33.4 kilograms, an initial velocity of 900 meters per second, with the ability to punch through 163 millimeters of armor, mounted at an angle of 30 degrees at the distance of 1,000 meters. And 143mm at 2000 meters. Rate of fire was from 6 to 8 shots per minute thanks to the naval style rammer. Ammunition for the S-70 consisted of 30 shells. Rather than the bulky pneumatic loading mechanism that was used on the first machine, a smaller chain mechanism with the electric drive was deployed. The number of machine guns on the IS-7 reached 8, 2 large caliber and the rest 7.62mm RP-46s. A second CPV-44 was added on the roof of the turret for firing at air and ground targets, and additionally 2 7.62mm machine guns and a 14.5mm were mounted in the gun mantled. So in summary, the IS-7 is a 68-ton heavy tank with a 130mm naval gun equipped with an assisted loading system that allows for a reload of between 10 and 7.5 seconds, all on a chassis with a 15.4 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio that allows it to reach up to 60 km per hour on flat ground and averages around 32 km per hour on rough terrain. All this whilst being invulnerable to Yak Tiger guns and having a shell that penetrates 250mm of flat armor at 500 meters distance. And to top it off, 2 large caliber machine guns to deal with lightly armored tanks, one 14.5mm on the roof and one coaxially. So let's take a look at the armor model provided by the World of Tanks model viewer. Now frontally, as you can see, the armor is very similar to the IS-3s in terms of shape, but is quite a bit thicker. The armor plate is only 150mm thick, but due to the angling can reach anywhere between 330 to 400mm effective armor. The strip that joins the upper and lower glacis is 270mm thick and angled by itself, so not much chance of even penetrating this. And the lower glacis, whilst being a weak spot since it's less angled, is still 150mm thick and can go anywhere between 255 to 266mm of effective armor. The turret, as you can see, is in typical Soviet style, extremely angled. The side cheeks are 217mm thick and due to the angling can go between 250 to, again, almost 400mm of effective armor, and as you go along, the angle just makes the armor extremely effective. This whole turret front is between 270 to 240mm thick by itself, not accounting for armor. Even the turret side is 210 here and 185 in the back half. What is also quite amazing is the gun mantles. 350mm on the flat front, with this part here being extremely thick as well, and having another mantle in just behind that, acting as spaced armor. This gun mantle is pretty much going to be impenetrable by anything in the game. The driver's hatch is only 140mm thick, so you might have a chance to penetrate this with HESH shells, but again, thanks to the angling, it's unlikely. Now let's look at the side armor profile. As you can see, we have this typical style of Russian angled upper side armor. Now the lower side is not that thick, only 100mm thick, it's still decently armored, but should be penetrable if the thing is angled, even if the thing is angled, although you will have the tracks in the way, and we know how tracks work in War Thunder. The upper side is only 150mm thick, but is angled by itself, so it can bounce some shots, but it can be penetrated. This is definitely where you would want to shoot the IS-7 from the side. And then this bit is just, don't even think about it. 130mm thick at a extreme angle. It's above 300mm of effective armor. Don't even think about shooting the side armor. As you can see, the IS-7 would be frontally invulnerable to anything but the Chieftain's APDS and well-placed HEAT-FS rounds, with the gun mantle being so thick and spaced that even ATGMs might have problems penetrating it. HESH might just about have a chance on the driver's hatch, but is still very likely to bounce due to the extreme angling. And even from the side, you've got the traditional Soviet-style troll-angled armor, which forces you to have to aim perfectly, even at the flat side of a tank. So, what's my opinion on it? I can actually describe it in 2 words. Power creep. If the tank is implemented as it historically was, we're looking at a very mobile, heavily armored tank with a very powerful and fast-firing gun that will be just an absolute nightmare to take out, even from the side if you're running anything but HEAT-FS. The crew of 5 gives it decent survivability, and most of them are positioned in the well-protected turret, which is mostly invulnerable to 128mm APAG shells, even from the side. Now, I couldn't find any sources if this tank had any kind of HEAT-FS shell available to it, so the T-10M's gun might still be more versatile. But the opposition to tier 5 Soviets doesn't really have much armor in the first place. Now, I want to make clear that I'm heavily against the introduction of this tank, alright? So my views might be biased against it, but that is exactly why I want you guys to discuss your opinions in the comments. Now, will it be completely overpowered? Not really, at least not in the current HEAT-FS and ATGM meta. However, facing one of these beasts in a stock tier 5 tank with APDS shells is going to be an absolute nightmare. And I can already imagine the battles with half the Soviet teams consisting of these tanks steamrolling across the map, bouncing shots, while the other half is IT-1s sitting in the back of the map and cross-mapping anything that pops up. But those are just my humble predictions. If you want to form your own opinion, I'll leave links to all of the sources that I used in the description of this video. And I'm going to run a poll asking if you are for or against the introduction of this tank, how you'd like to see it implemented, and what reasonings you have. Anyways, I'm off to record some more Panzer medals, and I'll see you then. My name is MikeGoesBoom, and thank you for watching.